Good morning and welcome to Friday. Wow, we're moving in towards the weekend, closing out another week coming up here. So here we are on Friday. Everybody seems to look forward to a Friday. And without any further ado, we're going to jump right in. A meditation on the hard sayings of Jesus. We're dealing today with divorce. Dealing with divorce, a tough subject. And notice that they ask questions of Jesus. They ask Jesus questions about divorce. And here's one of the main reasons why. There were two battling schools of thought, Shammai and Hillel. And it was important how to interpret and apply Torah to everyday situations and circumstances. And what had happened was that there had been the devising of and abusing of the law of divorce. It had moved from finding a woman and betrothing to her, which was a legal procedure that was then consummated some months later in a wedding service and actual physical consummation of the marriage, that in between the time a woman could be found to be impure, and that could be the thing that dissolved the wedding procedure. So if a woman was found to have been unfaithful to her engaged husband, or something came out, or there was something in the genealogies that would bar getting married, then there would have to be a divorce procedure. So we tend to look at this through the filter of someone gets engaged, then they get married, then they go through a divorce. But in the Jewish procedure, the Hebrew procedure, someone became committed to marriage, and once they committed to the marriage and came under this covenant or contract between families, then it would require a divorce to stop the consummation of the marriage. So that's a big difference in what's going on in the procedure. So they come to him, and they come to him with this question, or he offers an answer to this question, because these two schools, Shammai and Hillel, differ in their understanding the law of divorce. Now, Hillel was very much more conservative. Shammai, as a general rule, was very much more liberal. And that particular school of Shammai would basically say any good reason that a man could document would be sufficient to provide for a divorce, whether it was in the betrothal process or after the consummation of the marriage. Now, what this ends up doing is this kind of liberality is it tends to, in a patriarchal, male-dominated society, tends to wreak havoc on the females, upon the wives, upon the betrothed ones. And it would not take much thought at all for us to understand just how tragic this would be in the terms of human fallout. And then you would have this great difficulty going forward because of what it would mean in the life of that woman. And so it just seems that Jesus comes at this from the perspective that's rather surprising to them, because it was always from the perspective of the man. But Jesus comes at it in the perspective on behalf of the women. Now, one key feature that had happened is that they had gotten away from the idea in the book of Genesis that he had made them male and female. And that what had happened was that they had been put in an utterly subjective role rather than a mutually subjective role, where that there would be an interplay between the man and the woman in a sense of co-equal partners in this new adventure called marriage. Rather, they were seen as chattel. They were seen as property. And because of that mentality, Jesus is actually attacking that mentality of property and a very improper understanding of women. So he goes back to the beginning on this, and he actually strengthens a position that would make Hillel look liberal. He says, I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and some would argue that being sexually immoral is the automatic dissolution of the covenant of marriage. This is what endangers it and could essentially put it to death. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality. So he's stating that the only escape clause to a marriage is one of a confirmed immorality. Makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. What he's saying is you're actually spreading this idea rather than containing it by what you have done. You're spreading the idea of adultery. You're creating more instances which make this true in somebody's life, and they have to deal with the moral reality of that and the psychological reality of that. And who is getting the short end of that stick? The ladies, girls, women, because they were being discarded just for any reason. Jesus takes it back to the original. He takes it back to the original intention of Yahweh, the creator of everything that exists. And he elevates or re-elevates ladies, women, girls, back to a standard that is stipulated within the Word of God. From the beginning, Jesus would often say, it was not so. So he is restoring things back to the original design, and he's scraping away these inventions of the school of Hillel as well as the invention of the school of Shammai. And at times, he disagrees with them both and takes it back to the original. Was this a hard saying? It was a very hard saying. Jesus was opposing the schools of thought of the rabbis. He was opposing the liberality at which they were coming at this issue. He was opposing the way they were seeing women in the context of the issue. He took it all on without blinking an eye because he stated truth and he dealt with it in truth. This may not be an answer we even want to hear today, but it puts people, the reality is, having a lax mentality about marriage puts people in a terrible place, especially women, as for no cause at all, they are put into a position of being seen as or breaking this law of adultery and spreading it around, moving it from person to a greater extent. And that's the very thing that the enemy is against. I mean, the law is against allowing this to spread. It needs to be headed off. It needs to be stopped. Jesus is affirming the value of marriage, and he is narrowing the field of acceptable reasons why somebody would leave a partner in marriage. We might not like to hear that today with our modern ears, but the idea of problems in marriage is not new. It's as old as the world having begun. And finding an easy way out for a difficulty has always been at the forefront of people's minds. But the fallout that it leaves behind in people's lives is what Jesus is aware of and what he's dealing with. So, as you go forward in your day on Friday, we can focus back, you and I, into this idea that Jesus affirms and asserts the central core of reality of people and of the Word of God, of a Creator who loves people and has designed his law in such a way as to minimize evil and the corruption and its spread in people's lives, and would maximize people's commitment to God in walking out the reality of responses to what can go on in people's lives. So Lord bless you on this Friday as you think about that. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow as we press on into the next topic of the hard sayings of Jesus. We'll see you then.